If we were perfect, we wouldn't need accountability. That's my view. Accountability is not perfection. I think it's important for everyone to hear that we do look at every single financial statement and every single renewal, and we take our jobs very seriously. Well, I think one of the big trends we're seeing is more desire for accountability. We're in a very watching world. We're being asked more and more from donors how funds are being used or what's going on.
People are really paying attention.
They are. When I think of accountability in my own personal life, it's always about course correction. And you need someone to step alongside and have that hard conversation, or, of course, in a loving way. It can't be just a hard conversation. It has to be a loving conversation as well. It's really what we've done is it's almost restore some trust between the donor and the ministry at that point. And it's really fun to see when that happens.
Well, Jake, welcome to the ECFA podcast.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. Great to be here.
Yeah, thank you so much for taking the time. And this is what we call Behind the Seal, where we go behind the scenes with those that we have the opportunity to visit with here on the podcast. I'm especially excited to get to talk with you because you're here on the ECFA team. So we're really going behind the seal, if you will. But yeah, tell everyone who's listening just a little bit about your role, and then maybe a behind the scenes of God's leading you to this ministry and what really drew you to ECFA.
Yeah. Well, Michael, I'm the vice president of member accountability and really just have the opportunity to work with all of our members in one way or another, which is just this unique aspect of being able to be here at ECFA. And, we have a great team that I lead and able to work with on a day-by-day basis. But really just my role really is once someone becomes a member, they kind of fall under that accountability role at that point. And so just have the opportunity to work with them there. When I think of what led me here to ECFA, I've been able to work with some great organizations in my past and have been here at ECFA, I guess, for almost 3 years. So coming up close on 3 years, and really just love being able to use the skills that God's given me for His purposes. Whenever I speak with ministries, I consider myself a partner with them. And it's just, and while I'm not doing the frontline ministry with them or there, but I do get to speak into it and get to hear about it and just get to be part of it from behind the scenes.
Good. Yeah, I love that you use that word partner with ministries, because we're going to talk about accountability on today's podcast. That's in your title, that's in the name of ECFA. So I definitely want to talk about that. But I also want to take this opportunity to say thank you for the work that you do. You mentioned the great team here at ECFA, and we do have a wonderful team, but you do just a phenomenal job leading that team. And so I want to take this opportunity just to say how much we appreciate you and the work that you do. And yes, God has gifted you with just an amazing mind around some of these financial issues and the things that we help our members on. But to Jake, what really comes out is just your heart in all that you do. And so I just want to take that opportunity to say thank you as well.
Yeah, thanks, Michael.
So yeah, let's transition now. Let's just jump into this conversation about accountability. Yes, it's in your title. It's also in the name of ECFA. This is a role that we play. And like you said, we're kind of behind the scenes, if you will, like for a lot of our members as they're out doing direct program work and things. ECFA is this partner behind the scenes through accountability and through this relationship. So let's just start with, what does accountability mean to you? How does that look like? How have you seen it here at ECFA?
Yeah. Well, I think, Michael, you hit it. Accountability is about relationship. And to me, you can't have accountability unless we have relationships. And so we work really hard to build those relationships with our members, whether that's through, it's not always face-to-face, it's not always even on the phone, but whether that's through digital or other communication efforts, we do strive to build that relationship. And, to me, accountability, it really is, like you said, it's behind the scenes. We're not on the front lines of ministry, and we don't want to be. What we want to do is really empower the ministry to reach more people. I think of all the ministries that we work with, they all have these amazing visions, and just in this what some would call a crazy mission to reach people or to translate Bibles or whatever that mission may be. And we get the opportunity to really empower them through, whether that's through resources, or through educational calls, through this podcast, I guess, as well. But just being able to have those hard conversations at times. Accountability is about hard conversations. I think sometimes we want to be perfect, and if we were perfect, we wouldn't need accountability. That's my view. Accountability is not perfection. Accountability is recognizing that dependence on God and knowing that at some point we're human, and we're gonna mess up.
Sure.
And accountability, what ECFA strives to do, is that redemptive approach, and to come alongside and say, okay, let's course correct. When I think of accountability in my own personal life, it's always about course correction. There are times whenever you just mess up, and you need someone to step alongside and have that hard conversation, or, of course, in a loving way. It can't be just a hard conversation. It has to be a loving conversation as well, because that accountability partner really has to love you as well. And we love our ministries in our churches that we work with.
Yeah, no, that's so good. Wow, there's a lot that you just shared that I think we'll have the opportunity in this conversation to unpack a lot of those thoughts. But I think a real natural starting point too, Jake, would be, as you work with, like you said, all the many different ECFA members of sizes, types, different work that they're doing. At the core, though, they all share these values. They want to be held accountable, enter into an accountability relationship. I guess tell us from your unique lens, because you talk with so many of them, why do you see organizations come to ECFA, even just initially, and wanting to start this accountability relationship and also continue it?
Yeah. Well, I think, Michael, they desire to be trusted. I think there's just a desire for ministries to be above reproach. I think they recognize the importance of their work. They recognize the importance of handling funds in a God-honoring way. People are giving their resources to ministries and churches to use for kingdom purposes. And there comes a great responsibility with that. And so I think organizations, they want to enhance trust. They want to do things the right way. They don't, and no organization wakes up and is like, I'm going to do the wrong thing today. They want to do the right thing, and they can do the right thing without accountability. But I think they desire to be held accountable. They want a partner who they can lean into, to trust, but to also, like I said before, that course correction piece, that's willing to just have that conversation to say, we should look into this a little bit more, or tell me a little bit more about this process. And from our application stage all the way into the accountability stage, whenever they're a member, it's all built on that. It's all built on, again, the building of the relationships, but also just providing resources and sharing the why. Why do we have the standards, and what do the standards? What's it look like in a practical way for ministries to adopt the standards and to go forward with complying with the standards?
Yeah, let's continue along kind of a thought along those lines too, which is, as I think about accountability, and you mentioned accountability in your personal life and in different ways that we experience this dynamic of accountability, but really the value of accountability is only there in really the willingness, I guess, kind of both parties that are involved. But I think especially let's say on our side, from an ECFA standpoint, being willing to ask the tough questions or being willing to have certain systems and processes in place to really provide meaningful accountability. So just let's go there and talk about on a very practical level, because there may be people who are listening that they're not aware of all that ECFA does on a day-to-day basis to actually provide that meaningful accountability. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. Well, you're right, Michael. It's a two-way street. Accountability is, and it's built on trust both ways. We expect our ministries to be honest in their communications with us, and they expect us to be honest with them as well, even through the hard communications. But one of the things that we do have that every year is ministries renew their membership. So this isn't a one-time thing. It's not just go through an application and then you're in for life. It's an ongoing work for ministries. It's, every year it's renewing. It's committing to having financial statements done by a CPA. This is a big commitment. It's a commitment not only of their time, but it's also a commitment of their resources. And accountability is commitment. You're committing to something very seriously. And we take our job seriously when it comes to accountability. And I think our ministries and churches do as well. It's serious for them. But so through the renewal, it's really their opportunity yearly to show that they are in compliance with the standards. It's our biggest accountability process that we have here at ECFA. With over 2,600 members, it means 2,600 renewals every year that our team goes through and has the opportunity. Really, I share with our staff all the time that the renewal is a story of the ministry's accountability throughout the year. It walks through the questions related to our standards, but we also get the opportunity to look at other documents, and they all tell the story of how the ministry uses their resources, how their board really is governing. It just shows this beautiful picture of what ministries are doing. And so I think I'll pause there. We have other accountability processes, Michael, which but I think the renewal really is that key cog in the wheel that's yearly and is really our touch point every year with them.
That's a great way to put that. And that's a real distinctive of ECFA because, and when we say membership, we also are really referencing the accreditation aspect of what we do. So organizations being held accountable to certain standards, that ECFA has, and that's our accreditation process. And they earn, this is behind the seal, they earn the right to display the ECFA seal of integrity and so forth. But that is a real distinctive of ECFA because there are other accreditation models where there maybe aren't yearly touch points. It may be just every few years or things of that nature. So that has been a real key distinctive of ECFA over the years and just speaks to really the commitment of our members to be held accountable to these standards on a yearly basis and ECFA's role, that two-way street like you were talking about. But here's another practical question, and that is, what happens inevitably with all of the annual accreditation renewals that are processed when there's something that we see where, and maybe it's even something an organization has identified, where they've said, hey, we realize there is maybe a change in our board or there is a change in something financially. And so we see that there's no longer compliance with the standards or there's questions that are raised. Like on a practical level, what does that look like?
Yeah, well, and it takes a lot of different forms. And maybe even stepping back, I think it's important for our listeners to know this is voluntary. That organizations are completing the renewal every year voluntarily. This isn't a requirement. And I think that shows just the reason why organizations want it. They're voluntarily saying we want to be held accountable, and I think that's really critical for everyone to hear is that they're not required to do this, but they want it. But through the renewal, we really ask this whole series of questions relating to all the standards, and that renewal gets adjusted on a yearly basis, kind of based on what we're seeing in the field. So we're really trying to find different ways to ask questions or different ways to ensure that members are in compliance. But of course, there are times in a renewal where we're reviewing it and there's an issue. Like you said, it could be a board member. There's that just happens. You're not prepared for it, and ECFA does require 5 board members, and if you go under 5, then that's a standard issue that we have to work through with a ministry. Again, it's redemptive. So, we're in the ministry's corner, in the church's corner, to hold them accountable. We're for them. We want them to come back into compliance.
Right.
And so we work closely with them. But just through the renewal process, it may mean just to reach out to the ministry. Our staff, of course, loves to engage with our ministries. So we'll reach out and ask additional questions. If something just doesn't look right on the renewal, or there's a question we have in the financial statements, The first step is always to reach out to the ministry to gain more context. We don't know what happened. Maybe something has changed even since the renewal has been submitted. When they submitted it, maybe this was the case, but now that it's a few weeks later, that's not the case anymore. So we want to make sure we have the most up-to-date information. And so we work closely through that communication, but there are times when there's more serious things that may hold up a renewal, or we can't renew a ministry quite yet. We need them to take some additional steps, or maybe we can go ahead and renew the ministry, but there's going to be some monitoring that needs to happen. Like you are in compliance, but we want to monitor some different things throughout the next year. And then we also have this whole other slew of accountability processes that includes check-ins and renewal pluses and compliance reviews and all these other things that we can do that come into play at that point. So the renewal isn't the first stop. It is the key. Like I said, it's the key cog. But out of that, it can generate other accountability processes just to partner with ministries to be in compliance and to verify compliance.
Yeah, absolutely. Another question for you would be just knowing how many renewals that come in, each year here at ECFA. I think a question would be, like, how does ECFA even process all of those? And there may even be some who aren't aware. I think this is implied in what you said, but there is a personal touch with every accreditation renewal. This isn't something that's just kind of sent in and there's some automatic system where it's just approved, but there's a real personal look at each one. Just on a practical level, tell us a little bit about, God's blessed us with a growing team, but tell us, like, how does that work? How are we able to accomplish that each year?
Yeah, well, through God's grace, we're able to accomplish it. When you think of 2,600 members, it means processing over 200 renewals a month. And renewals happen twice a year based on ministry's year end. And so, but you're right. We have this amazing team that continues to grow as ECFA grows, the team grows. But we have a team of great CPAs that are committed to the mission. All of our team members have a desire to see our members succeed. And to see our members in compliance with ECFA standards. A lot of them maybe have come from other ECFA members or have been part of, have known ECFA for years, and really just have a passion for what they do. And I think that passion really drives us to do things that at times just you sit at the end of the day and you're like, wow, I can't believe we got through all of that today. But you're right. We do look at every renewal. The only thing that's automated is the collection of the information. After that point, once a member submits their renewal electronically, no more paper packets coming in the mail.
Thankful for that.
Yes.
Technology.
Right.
That's one of the keys.
Technology is key. And our staff can then really look at those renewals from anywhere, anywhere where they're working. And so there is a personal eye on 2,600 renewals, on 2,600 financial statements, and however many 990s that come through. Some ministries may not be required for a 990, but there's a personal eye on all of those every year. And while that doesn't necessarily mean a phone call to the ministry or even an email, I mean, we get some renewals that are clean and we work through. And again, there's other accountability processes that we do occasionally to have a deeper conversation. But we just kind of work our way through them. And over the course of the whole year, they really do take the whole year to accomplish. And of course, things are coming in at different times with financial statements and things. But I think it's important for everyone to hear that we do look at every single financial statement and every single renewal, and we take our jobs very seriously.
Yet at the same time, one of observation too that I think is important is we do take that role very seriously. But Jake, just going a little behind the scenes, I'll go there with this. Is you do a great job also leading our team and having fun along the way, and also that there's joy in the work. So tell us a little bit about that too. What does it look like? Because I mean, that's kind of a big rock every year, these 2,600 plus renewals. Tell us a little bit about how do you incorporate joy into the work? Like, how do we continue to have fun even while taking the job very seriously?
Yeah. Well, Michael, I do love to have fun. So I work hard to not make this an assembly line type process. It's not about just getting the work done. And as a team, I'm a big believer. If you're not having fun as a team, something's wrong.
Something's not right. Yeah.
And so, while our team is not all here in the same office, we do, and I think it's important we go behind the scenes. We're going behind the scenes here, so give you some thoughts on what we do. So we actually have a day a week that we dedicate to renewals as a team. This means pretty much everybody on our team, on the member accountability and relations team, dedicates a certain day of the week, especially during the busy renewal season. Not necessarily every Thursday, but about 6 months out of the year. And that day we try to all work on renewals. We block our calendars. We give that day to renewals. We of course have some team members that work on renewals almost all year. But we give that day to renewals, and we do different things. We since we're not all here and we all work in different locations, we try to collaborate as a team through technology. And I know a lot of people listening have done that as well, learned to collaborate digitally. And so we do that. And at the end of each renewal day, we celebrate what we've done for the week and how many renewals we've accomplished as a team. And just like any ministry or church listening, we have goals. We do set team goals, and we don't necessarily meet those goals all the time, but we still celebrate it. We celebrate what we've done as a team because this truly is a team effort. And so we play games at the end of the day. We've had scavenger hunts in our houses where we're all running around the house trying to find things. We've done just all sorts of different fun activities as a team to not just have fun, but when you've looked at renewals all day, it's nice to kind of debrief as a team at the end of the day and just do something that kind of just continues to draw us closer to each other. And that's important to me. So I'm glad we have that opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just think it's good, for people to hear and to know that there's joy in this work, and not just related to the mission and the different members that we get to work with, but even with each other. There's that dynamic too. And two other important points of celebration too before we move on. I see ingredients that you incorporate are testimonies, telling the good stories of what's happening, the encouragement that we hear from other ECFA accredited members as we get to work with them. So that's a little plug for, hey, if you have encouragement and you're a member who's listening, share that with a team member who's working on your renewal, but also food. There's also food sometimes, and that can be there's even something biblical about that, right? Breaking bread together, even if that's virtually, incorporating that into some of the work as well.
Yeah, and there's a few of us that we always ask what other snacks other people have for Renewal Day, because it's important to us to have good snacks on those days. But I missed one aspect that I want to talk about of the renewal cycle that this really motivates our team, and that is part of the renewal is a website review. And so for those listening, what other opportunity do you have to look at 2,600 websites during the year of large ministries and small ministries working in very secure areas, or maybe just working in the same community that we live in? I think of, here in Winchester, we have members that live here and work here. And that really motivates our staff to see, what is God doing in your ministry? While we're looking at the website in the lens of our standards, I still encourage our staff to spend a little time learning what's going on. All of our members are doing amazing work in the communities where they are or overseas, and I think if we don't pause to look at that, we can easily forget what we're actually doing. Is we're, like I said before, we're behind the scenes partner to empower this work. And that's just another little added benefit of our renewals that I wanted to share.
Absolutely. Yeah. Real opportunity for organizations to get to tell the story. And that includes those of us here at ECFA that are following that story. I want to come back to, Jake, something that you also said as we began this conversation. I thought this was so key. You said that accountability or even integrity, it's not necessarily perfection, and that ECFA's overarching posture, we believe that this is biblical, as we really take a redemptive approach to the aspects of accountability and how we work with organizations. So let's kind of go there for a second too and say, what processes does ECFA have in place when there may be a situation that we're working through with an organization where, yeah, they weren't perfect. And so there is an issue with the standards compliance, and that's been brought to their attention by ECFA. Like, what processes do we have in place? Talk about that aspect of accountability.
Yeah. Well, when it comes to this fact that we know there's a standard concern, you can go to the website and kind of see what our different processes are, but it may mean a formal compliance review with a ministry. And again, I think we've chatted about this, is we're in your corner. We're in the ministry's corner. But we're going to ask the hard questions. And I want to make that clear. Just because we're in their corner doesn't mean we're not going to ask very serious, hard questions.
And to that point, also in the corner of the donors and those that the organizations have said, we're accountable because we want to demonstrate these to our supporters. So it's kind of that both, right?
It is, absolutely. It's a fine balance, too, of walking through that in complete transparency with everyone of what that process looks like. And so we have put it out on the website so people know what those processes are.
And we'll be sure to include some links to that in the notes. But yeah, continue.
So when there is a formal compliance review, we first of all, I think it's important to stop. And one of the things I try to do with all of our members when we're going through this process is to stop and pray. We rely heavily on God's wisdom through these processes. And so we spend a lot of time in prayer. I spend a lot of time in prayer. I mean, I work with a lot of those members that are in that formal compliance review, and we cover those with prayer to be able for God to give us insight into the right questions to ask, for God to just work in the hearts of the member, but also in the hearts of the donors as well, to accept the information. And so we walk through that process with additional information and really hard questions. And sometimes that may mean going on site to a ministry. But like you said, our goal is redemptive. Our goal is not accountability. Effective accountability is not kicking you out whenever there's an issue. And I think if we have personal accountability partners, we know that we're very thankful that our accountability partner doesn't drop us whenever we mess up. And so we don't do that either. We come alongside the ministry and we say, okay, what needs to be done to bring you back into compliance? And we share what needs to be done, and we gauge the heart of the ministry. I think in almost all instances, the ministry wants to come back into compliance, or church. When I say ministry, I also mean church. All the same there.
All the different types. Yep.
But they want to come back into compliance with the standards. Their intent was not to deceive, but sometimes something gets communicated we didn't catch, or just something happens and we fall out of, and a ministry falls out of compliance, and we come alongside them to walk them back into compliance. Now, with that said, there are instances when maybe the compliance is severe, or there's other instances where we do have to take further action. Maybe that's suspension or termination of a member. That does happen. One of the unique things that we do at ECFA is we want to be accountable as well, and we post those on our website. So when a member leaves, we post a reason why. Now it's a short reason, but we give some context to a member leaving, and we think that's important just so people know.
No, I think that is helpful because that is sort of behind the scenes in some way. Like, yes, we post a lot of that information out on our website about what our processes are and try to be appropriately transparent in that way. But that may not be something that's just immediately evident to those that follow ECFA. But yes, there are formal processes in place whenever there needs to be a formal review of compliance and compliance reviews being opened, and that can resolve in a number of different paths, including, like you said, the possibility of even a suspension or a termination in certain cases. We don't find that that's often the case, but those processes, those procedures are there. They're in place. There's one other aspect of accountability, too, that I want to just tag on to what you said, Jake, too, which is there's accountability in the work that we do as well. That is, we do all of this work on a day-to-day basis under the oversight of the ECFA Board of Directors. And so we rely heavily on their wisdom, their thoughtful questions, and really their oversight. So there's really so much accountability that's kind of in the mix, but I think that's an important point to bring out as well. I was going to ask you too, in some of these other processes, whether it be through check-ins, those are just kind of the shorthand, is those are some more in-depth additional reviews that we do with members each year, or maybe it's with compliance reviews. I want to ask you about overarching trends and what sort of trends are you seeing from some of those conversations with leaders or from questions that donors are asking. But there could be, ministry leaders who are listening and they're saying, well, ECFA, you sure do have a pulse on what's going on because of all your different ways that you're overseeing accountability with members. Can you tell us, what are a few trends that you're seeing or things for organizations just to be mindful of?
Yeah. Well, I think one of the big trends we're seeing is there seems to be more desire for accountability. We're in a very watching world, and kind of everybody has a platform now. You can put something on social media and that gains traction. So I think ministries are seeing that happen and thinking we do need that accountability, because we're being asked more and more from donors how funds are being used or what's going on.
People are really paying attention.
They are, yeah. And so, through some of the trends that we're seeing is, just ensuring that you're being truthful in your communications, and, enhancing trust. So, and it's not, I'm not saying that that's like people aren't being truthful, but I think, a part of that standard really is standard 7.1 is really looking at it and saying, what does a reasonable donor think when they read your appeals? And I think that's a trend. And we do have to look at it with that lens of, well, what does a reasonable donor, when I look at this, what is that donor going to think is actually going to happen with their funds?
So truthfulness in communications as it relates to fundraising.
As it relates to fundraising. Other things, just kind of going back to governance, just that need to never step back. A active governing board is critical for the success of all organizations, and we of course get that opportunity to work closely to ensure some of those things. And the standards cover some of the things that the boards need to do, and so just working closely with boards and walking through those steps to ensure, we are meeting the standards and we're doing those things that are required of us.
No, that's good. And I'll mention just on a real practical note too, another aspect of accountability, which we don't have time to necessarily talk about, is the education, the proactive education around the standards and the outreach that's done. But one of the great tools that I thought you and the team did a great job with last year was this board responsibilities checklist. You were talking about the importance of boards being engaged and doing their work. So there was this checklist, right, where we went through and said, these are all the things that as a board of an organization that we should be responsible for each year, right?
Right. Yeah, there was. And even before that, just a few months before that, we published the top 10 compliance reminders, which really were driven from the work that we've done. And so, I'd encourage members to even go out and look at that and to see where are those, and even for not just members, but everybody to look to see where are some of the things that we're seeing that we're providing tips and resources to help our members.
Right. So not just identifying issues, but then also saying, here's what you should do.
Right.
And here are practical resources to help.
Absolutely.
Good. Well, Jake, one common thread and theme, a word that keeps coming up in our conversation, it's really appropriate that it is that word of trust. Mm-hmm. And ECFA's mission, it's all about enhancing trust. That is why we do what we do. So I just wanted to ask you too, like, how do you see the accountability relationship really enhancing trust? Like on a practical level, how have you seen accountability help enhance trust?
Yeah, that's a really good question. One of the unique things is sharing a concern. And so I think that's one way where we see that in action on a day-by-day basis is we have the opportunity for donors or for others to share concerns to ECFA.
That's where? On the website?
That's on the
Yep.
website,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. And it's anonymous. You can share anonymously. But that really is, it's a step of accountability, is allowing others to raise concerns. And that's pretty unique to ECFA and the work that we do. And so, I see those. I just think of some of the recent scenarios that I've walked through where we've been able to kind of connect the dots for donors and ministries to work closer together. So it's not, it's a two-way street when a concern comes in. We work with the individual. We also work with the ministry. In a lot of those scenarios, it's maybe just a misunderstanding. Mm-hmm. And we're able to partner with both and kind of form that relationship to where the donor gets a contact at the ministry and they're able to then talk with the ministry to really get their questions answered. That's our goal in those scenarios. When people share concerns, we know that there's a reason why they're sharing a concern, but it's not always out of ill intent for the ministry. In most cases, it's I can't really think of any scenarios where it was ill and they meant to cause harm to a ministry. It really was. We saw this and we love giving to this ministry, mm-hmm. and we just want to make sure that we understand. And so we walk through that process, and I think that's a key part of accountability. Is really what we've done is almost restore some trust between the donor and the ministry at that point. And it's really fun to see when that happens. When you hear back from a donor of like, hey, I got my questions answered and I don't have any concerns. And we do encourage, on the form itself, we encourage donors to reach out to the ministry. And part of that is, and we encourage that on every member's profile, you'll see a donor contact and a way to contact the ministry. We want to open that relationship up for mm-hmm. donors and so members have to share that information for donors to contact them, which I think is really helpful.
It is really helpful. And just as you share that, it was just really sinking in with me how much of an honor and a privilege it is for ECFA to get to be in this role. And like you said, to help facilitate or make connections where sometimes there are questions and really bring back that level of trust. Mm. Like what a great privilege that we have. And I also want to say just how much I appreciate both donors and ministries just being part of that process with ECFA, from a donor standpoint, raising whatever questions there may be. For ministries that step up, like you mm-hmm. said, voluntarily to become ECFA accredited, they play such a vital role. And I just feel like when we all really lean into that, trust really can be enhanced. That's a beautiful picture.
Absolutely.
So, all right. Well, we've covered a lot of ground. I do want to ask, is there anything that we've missed? Is there anything else that you would add?
Yeah, Michael, as I think about our conversation, we've done a great job covering accountability, and I know there's other processes we didn't get to. And you made reference to this earlier, was just that kind of proactive accountability. Like how are we proactive in our accountability? And there always is. There's a proactive side, but there's also a reactive side. But I'd like to focus a little more on the proactive side and just mention, ECFA has a whole host of resources available. Knowledge Center with hundreds and hundreds of documents available. But for those members that are listening or those interested, I think one of the most unique things is when you call ECFA, you get a real person on the phone, mm-hmm. and that is proactive accountability. We want ministries to reach out and ask questions as it relates to the standards. If you're thinking about going down a road somewhere, like doing something, and you're not sure how that relates to the standards, like we invite that conversation. Mm-hmm. And I mean, members can submit things online. They can call in all different ways. If I love talking to members. I love working through these just scenarios that they're just not sure. And of course, we don't provide legal advice. That's not our role. But we can provide guidance and resources to lead them down a path of just increased accountability. And it's just such a fun opportunity. So I would just kind of leave it there of resources. Reach out to ECFA, ask questions, and don't ever feel like you're bothering us. But do reach out, because we invite that.
Oh, that's a good word. So guidance, resources, relationships, and all of these aspects are part of accountability. So well said. Thank you for opening that door and really just making that very clear to both our accredited members and also donors and those who are listening. This vital role that ECFA plays in accountability. Yeah, it's really an honor to get to do that. And Jake, thank you to you and the team for really making that possible on a day-to-day basis. We just appreciate that so much.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. It's been fun.
All right, it has been. We'll look forward to having you back on a future podcast.
All right, sounds good.
All right.